Hello, I am Tim Lichtenberg from the University of Oxford, and in this video I summarize our paper in JGR planets, vertically resolved magma ocean protoatmosphere evolution. In this research project, we developed a coupled numerical model of the evolution of molten rocky planets and their overlying atmosphere. The primary goal of our work is to determine how young planets cool down from the primordial molten magma ocean state to a clement climate. Specifically, we test how the thermophysical properties of young magma ocean planets evolve in response to different primary inventories of volatiles as a result of their formation epoch. This question is relevant for observations of rocky exoplanets under high installation. If these are molten, they can be primary testbeds for probing how young planets evolve in more temperate conditions. Our simulations are also relevant for the climate and planetary surface during the Hadean Eon on early Earth. This links the observations of magma ocean planets directly to studies on the prebiotic chemical context of the origins of life. For instance, plausible theories for the origins of life promote mildly reducing surface and climatic conditions in the Hadean that favor, for instance, methane or hydrogen cyanide in the atmosphere. But geochemical proxies for early Earth usually suggest that the planetary surface was relatively oxidizing during that time. So there's a tension between these fields that arises from the uncertain nature of the early surface and climate state of the Earth. In order to advance the abilities to better model and possibly observe these types of planets in the future and constrain the climate and surface of Hadean analog environments, we developed this coupled model of the magma ocean and its overlying atmosphere to probe the planetary geophysics, cooling timescales, and the evolution of the climate for planets with plausible inventories of volatiles. Let's start with the baseline scenario of the magma ocean cooldown for Earth, according to the current standard picture after the moon-forming giant impact, which is shown on this slide here. You see time after the melting collision and log scale, surface temperature on the left y-axis, and surface pressure equivalent in either H2O or CO2 on the right. Some time after the collision, the planet cools down from several thousand Kelvin. In this early phase, the planet is in a runaway greenhouse state. Most of the initial atmosphere is made up of carbon dioxide. Most of the water that is in the planet is dissolved in the magma ocean because water is very soluble in molten silicates. At some point, the internal heat flux drops, the hothouse state cannot be maintained anymore, and this enables the cooling of the planet and the formation of the first oceans. This happens quite rapidly after the magma ocean was sustained for an extended time interval and enabled the habitable planet to develop that we know today. But does this sequence of events always work out the same? In fact, it does not. For instance, the magma ocean phase can leave a planet desiccated without any of the water that was delivered during the planet formation epoch. This is shown on the right plot here. This shows orbital distance, which translates to stellar radiation, versus final water inventory and solidification time for Earth-sized magma ocean planets with a predefined initial inventory of water, and only water. Under these conditions, planets beyond a certain critical distance evolve in the Earth-like fashion. They don't lose their water and can cool down to clement conditions within a few million years. However, at higher installation or in closer orbits, the same planet loses most of its water and becomes bone dry. The reason for this is the higher stellar radiation, which leaves the planet in a hothouse state for far longer, potentially up to billions of years. The water in this case breaks down due to photolysis in the upper atmosphere, and the resulting hydrogen is lost to space quickly. This is one theoretical explanation for why Venus today is the hellish place we know, and Earth is a habitable world. So far, this seems reasonable, like a theory that can be exported to other planets, and that we can rely on for understanding of Hadean Earth and analog exoplanets. But unfortunately, this may not be the case. The uncertainties regarding the magma ocean atmosphere, even for Earth, are very high. This is, for instance, expressed in these plots. You see the relative abundance, or fractionation, between the volatile elements that are both life essential and at the same time greenhouse active for the proto-Earth. They are plotted as ratios of the non-metallic Earth, which here means mantle plus atmosphere without the core, relative to carbonaceous chondrites, for 4 different scenarios of volatile delivery to the early Earth. The red BSE line shows the abundances we observe today in the bulk silicate Earth. The colored lines express our uncertainty on the degree of mixing between the iron core of the moon-forming impactor and the proto-Earth mantle. The 4 different scenarios show the resulting fractionation between H, N, C, and S just from core formation alone, core formation plus atmospheric loss after the magma ocean phase, and including a possible late accretion to Earth that is dominated by either volatile-rich carbonaceous chondrite-like impactors or a late accretion dominated by dry, reduced materials. This means that even for Earth, the relative abundance of these elements and their derived compounds can vary by orders of magnitude. And this means everything for the evolution of the magma ocean, as I try to demonstrate in the next plot. This shows the heat flux response, the energy that is radiated by a magma ocean planet to space, for the 7 different molecules that we tested in our research study. Left, you see planetary surface temperature versus outgoing thermal radiation, which neglects any incoming radiation from the central star. The magma ocean would in principle cool from right to left, and you see the difference in flux behavior for the different species and for a different initial volatile inventory of the planet. On the right, you see total net radiation. This means outgoing thermal radiation minus the incoming stellar radiation. The lines here are for a volatile equivalent of 10 bars in 2 different orbits, 1 and 0.4 AU. Above the equilibrium state, the magma ocean can cool down. Below, it would heat up. This is the Venus hothouse scenario I explained in the previous slide, generalized to other volatiles. Even if these plots are complex, they only tell half the story because they are essentially atmospheric models alone. They neglect the influence of the mantle, which is introduced here. Different volatiles have different affinities to dissolve and melt. This is shown on the left-hand side. Data points are from petrological experiments that measure the solubility of volatile species in magmas, expressed as solubility in the magma versus pressure. In the magma ocean case, the defining pressure is the gas phase pressure at the magma ocean atmosphere interface. As you can see, they vary by orders of magnitude. If the planet now is molten, parts of the molecules are therefore in the atmosphere, and parts are in the molten magma. If you add more volatiles to a planet, they become distributed between atmosphere and magma according to the solubility relationship that is derived from the laboratory measurements. Importantly, if the mantle solidifies, volatiles outgas because solid rock typically does not carry these volatiles as magma does. Therefore, there's a very tight feedback relationship between magma ocean solidification and the progressing atmospheric state. This is why we need to advance computational models that express and connect these relations to compute the solidification history of planets with diverse compositions. We do this as expressed in this model sketch. On the left, you see the principal model domain, which computes the planet cooldown in a 1D spherically symmetric geometry. We consider the effects shown here, namely core cooling, conduction, convection, crystallization, and outgassing from the mantle, and radiation, convection, condensation, and precipitation in the atmosphere. The planet is resolved vertically from the top of the atmosphere down to the core mantle boundary. The interior is computed using the spider code developed by Dan Bauer at the University of Bern. The mantle and atmosphere evolution are solved iteratively and are coupled with compositional and flux terms that share information between the code submodules during runtime, as shown on the right. On this slide, you see the evolution of magma ocean planets that are dominated by the 7 molecules that we test in this work, plotted with different colors and expressed in different physical quantities of interest. The planetary heat flux to space, surface temperature, mantle melt fraction, surface volatile pressure equivalent, and volatile mass fraction of atmosphere and interior. To capture the basic behavior, let us focus on the evolution of H2O first. The H2O dominated magma ocean cools down and solidifies on the order of about 1 million years. Once the mantle is dominantly solidified, the internal heat flux from convection cannot be sustained anymore, and the atmosphere collapses rapidly. The magma ocean atmosphere has evolved to a relatively cool climate with surface oceans. If you look at the right side, you see the close relationship between mantle cooling and outgassing. Because water is very soluble in the magma ocean, during most parts of the solidification, most water is actually dissolved in the mantle and the atmosphere is relatively thin. Only once the mantle is crystallized, the water rapidly outgasses, but immediately builds a liquid surface reservoir, oceans, because the temperatures are cold enough for the water to precipitate in the atmosphere. Let us compare this to the H2 case. H2 is relatively insoluble, but can also induce a strong greenhouse effect. Therefore, the surface temperature in this case remains much higher from the beginning, and the magma ocean never cools to below about 1500 K, if the atmosphere cannot be lost to space efficiently. These differences between primary volatile composition not only have effects on the cooling and crystallization of the mantle, but also affect the physical size and the extent of the planet. On the right side, you see the vertically resolved domain in our model for temperature in the mantle and atmosphere at 2 different snapshots during cooling, at 100 years and 1 million years. The green H2 case is vertically enormously extended and even after some time remains very large. The blue H2O case, on the other hand, shows strong variations in vertical stratification of the atmosphere and thus planet size between the magma ocean atmosphere at the cool down epoch once the oceans have formed. These planets have not only different sizes, but at different times they also look differently. Here you see the different atmospheric spectra for magma ocean planets for different atmospheric volatiles at different times as a function of wave number. This plot illustrates that the difference of shape in the spectra are profound, and exploration of these planets will therefore help us to discriminate between different scenarios of earliest planetary evolution, which is the foundation of the subsequent Hadean-like evolution of rocky exoplanets. Finally, in the paper, we further demonstrate that for a single composition, here specifically shown for H2O, differences in the geophysics of the mantle can manifest in possibly observable differences in the spectrum. For instance, these can be variable flow properties of the magma or build-up of surface crusts, like number 4 here on the bottom right. This is especially interesting because upcoming astronomical surveys may be able to observe these types of planets in extrasolar planetary systems. We have demonstrated this in a recent study. On the plot here, you see the probability to observe a magma ocean planet nearby young star-forming regions in the galaxy. This means in these star-forming regions, there are currently planets forming and molten. With astronomical facilities, we can in principle capture the afterglow of the young planets that are currently molten and therefore catch a glimpse of the atmosphere and volatile composition. We here compared 2 facilities, the ground-based, extremely large telescope that is currently being built in Chile by the European Southern Observatory and the potential space-based telescope, for which a large international consortium is currently forming that aims to promote the construction of it, the Large Interferometer for Exoplanets, or LIFE, which will observe Earth-sized planets in so-called habitable zone orbits around other stars in mid-infrared wavelength. To summarize, the magma ocean epoch following planetary formation is a key ingredient to further constrain both the diversity of habitable planets in the galaxy, the actual surface and climate state of the earliest Hadean epoch on Earth. The crystallization and cycling of volatiles during the magma ocean shapes the geochemical properties of the mantle and crust, and the composition of the earliest atmosphere. We here showed that different volatile inventories in young planets lead to orders of magnitude variations in cooling time, vertical stratification, and spectral appearance of young molten planets. The study and future observational surveys to characterize these planets connect the distribution of rocky exoplanets with the earliest Earth. Crucially, this can inform the origins of life community on the viability of proposed surface states and the climate of early Earth, and enables observational tests for specific environmental scenarios that can help refine our understanding of the volatile inventory, surface, and climate of the Hadean. With this, let me thank you very much for your interest and time, and please do not hesitate to reach out to any member of our author team with questions or comments. Thank you.